It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, what is going on, sir?
Happy Friday, everybody. We are making our way towards the weekend, and we have done our defensive rookie review. And we thought today would be a good day to kind of take a look at the defense overall and see exactly what the state of this is and how much repair we have actually done and how much work the Cowboys still have left to do.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to do our draft review starting back on Monday. We're going to touch on Josh Ball, the other offensive lineman that the Cowboys drafted later. We're going to look into some of the UDFAs. I actually have a couple guys I really, really like, so make sure you guys are tuning in next week for that. Today, Landon, we are looking at the Cowboys defense, how all these pieces fit. And if you are watching this on the YouTube side of things, or if you're watching this on WFAA, we've got a nice little graphic for you. Here, you can see how the Cowboys stuff is laid out so far, their defensive depth chart. Again, this is certainly not official by any means at all. This is Landon from his Microsoft Excel at his house putting together a nice little depth chart. But we're going to talk about the Cowboys defense. And I think the first thing we have to discuss is 3-4 versus 4-3. Because, Landon, everybody is panicking on Twitter because Dan Quinn mentioned they're going to be in some 3-4 looks. What does that actually mean?
Well, I think it's just a kind of a general misconception. I mean, 3-4's defense indicates 3 down linemen with 4, standing linebackers. 4-3 obviously indicates the opposite: 4 down linemen, 3 standing linebackers. And really, it's kind of what we think of as 3-4 versus 4-3 is actually more of a 2-gap system versus 1-gap system, right? So the 4-3s that we are used to, as coming from a Marinelli background, right, is a 1-gap scheme, meaning each player is responsible for 1 gap. They get into that gap and try to get through and get upfield and disrupt, right? And the only thing that they're responsible for is just getting through that specific gap along the offensive line, whether it's between the 3 technique is between the guard and the tackle. He lines up on the outside shoulder of the guard and he attacks that gap. And that's his responsibility. It's point and go. It's attack. It's going forward. 2-gapping is more of what we traditionally think of as 3-4s, right? Where it's a big, strong defensive end, like 5 techniques, 280 to 295 pounds, who have long arms, who can go toe-to-toe with offensive tackles, who can take them on and, separate, peek around the body, see what's going on, discard the blocker, make the tackle. Then they call that 2-gapping because when you attack the player and you are looking on either side, that means you have both gaps, right? You are responsible for either gap on the side of the player that you're going at. So the reason that Cowboy Nation is all messed up on this is because we had a guy in here who kind of mixed and matched that a little bit in Wade Phillips, right? Wade Phillips ran a 3-4, a true 3-4 with 3 down linemen and 4 standing linebackers, but it was a 1-gap system. And I think that's points to the flaw in the idea of the 3-4 versus 4-3, right? Is that ultimately where the rubber meets the road on 3-4 or 4-3 is the techniques used, the gap techniques used. And what makes this is all a very long way of saying what makes Quinn different than, let's say, Rod Marinelli is that Quinn will much more greatly or much more often mix up these techniques. And you heard it in his press conference, right? He talked about, and I think that this is the most descriptive way to talk about Quinn techniques, right? Is he talked about 3 jets and a plug. And I think that's really the best description, right? 3 jets, meaning 3 one-gappers who are, getting upfield and who are trying to disrupt, trying to get into that gap and just get through and make it to the backfield and disrupt. And then 1 guy who is, separating and is responsible for 2 gaps. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is that, usually you have your 2-gapper inside or a 0 or 1 technique. With Quinn, he will move that 2-gapper up and down the defensive line. You will see, if you go back to old Seattle tape, you'll see Red Bryant, who is we talked about 320 plus pound defensive end, who is 2-gapping as a defensive end. So that's really the key thing to remember here, is that I think for most points of the game, Quinn is going to want at least 3 guys 3 defensive linemen who are attacking, 1 who is playing kind of more of a 2-gap scheme. And when yes, perfect. Thank you so much. And when you get that going, what that allows you to do is do more things, because now you've got 1 guy who's accounting for 2 gaps. That gives you an extra gap that you've got covered in run defense. And that also allows you the opportunity to do some more interesting things with the linebackers. You can blitz them. You can, because they're not having to be responsible for 2 gaps, or at least all 3 of them aren't being responsible for 2 gaps. And then, traditionally, as you can see in this graphic here, right, they have a Leo, right, who's got his hand down on the ground, but there's no reason that guy can't stand up. And now, that really
in this defense, again, if you're not watching this on YouTube or on WFAA, I highly recommend you do this. Who would be the Leo? Would that be Randy Gregory in this case?
Yeah, probably in these cases, Randy Gregory. I mean, you could put Parsons out there too, like that, or Jalen Smith. I think all of these guys can kind of play that sort of role where they're stand-up pass rushers that you can. Gregory is the guy that you're going to want to be doing this most of the time, but you could definitely mix this up with some of these, forward-moving, bigger linebackers like we talked about with Parsons and Jalen Smith.
And I think, if you can see this image right here, this defensive end, I'm not even sure who it is, but it's lining up over the right tackle. That's going to be DeMarcus Lawrence all day. And he's great at that stuff. Head up on a tackle. He's going to be just fine. I think the question is, Landon, okay, a lot of people are confused where Micah Parsons is going to line up, because we've heard some Sam linebacker. We've heard some Will. If they're using this, let's say, 7-man front, I don't even really want to call it 4-3, 3-4, 7-man front, where do you anticipate Micah Parsons lining up?
I think he could line up in a couple of these spots. I think he could line up as the Will. I think he could line up as the Mike. I think he could line up as the Leo. He could line up as the Sam. He could line up in any one of these spots. These responsibilities aren't so unique that he can't learn all these spots. Mm-hmm. I think it's about where he's lining up and what the actual play call is, what the actual scheme is that's being run. And I think, it's kind of like how we talked about, or some people talk about, how do you get the value there? I think part of the value is that Micah Parsons can blitz and he can drop into coverage, and the offense play-to-play basis does not know what that player is going to do. So that that provides some schematic advantage to not giving away exactly what Parsons could be doing down to the quarterback pre-snap.
I've also seen, I think it was in a recent piece by The Athletic, a lot of people around the league believe that Micah Parsons is basically the new Bruce Irvin, right? And maybe you say, well, why do you spend the 12th pick on Bruce Irvin? Well, they spent the 12th pick on Micah Parsons, and Bruce Irvin was the 15th pick. But there's just not a lot of guys that can line up in that spot, right? Guys that are that athletic, that can play in space and can rush the passer. Do you envision Parsons having a Bruce Irvin-like role in this defense?
I think it's certainly possible. I think it's the thing about it is that he's so athletically gifted. He could do the Bruce Irving role. He could do the Bobby Wagner role. He could go back and forth between those roles.
Sure.
And I think that's where it's incredibly useful, because it allows you to take advantage of the other skill sets that you have on this defense. And Parsons can be the guy that makes it all right by playing him wherever you need him.
All right, let's take a quick break so I can tell you guys about Bet Online, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Get all the latest news, odds, and info on all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and UFC. Before the next pitch, head over to Bet Online on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Also want to tell you guys about Nugenix, the #1 selling free testosterone booster. And GNC is offering a complimentary bottle to all football fans in America. To get your free bottle, all you have to do is text DRAFT to 231-231. That is DRAFT to 231-231. All right, Landon, let's continue to get into this depth chart. How do we feel about this defense going into the rest of this offseason? Where are the holes? Where do you think are the strengths for this team?
Well, just to kind of give people a key real quick, and maybe hopefully not to depress people too much. The blue names are the names where I'm certain that they're starters. That I know that they have. There's basically two guys. I mean, we're not going to count.
Gregory's a starter, but go ahead, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty safe to say there too. But I just I'm going with the certain things, right? The sure things. And Jake McQuaid is the sure thing. So I think what you see is a ton of depth, and a lot of guys who. You feel pretty good about them getting snaps as opposed to, maybe elite top end guys all over this defense, right? I think, you see that the defensive end position is going to have a lot of work to do during this offseason. And there's a lot of different body types. I mean, and to be fair, I went by the Cowboys roster on a lot of this. So some of this may not be, completely accurate to their position. Like Watkins, for instance, he definitely will spend some time inside, Oh,
without a doubt.
Yeah. Like guys like Golson, he could do some inside out stuff as well. I actually had Urban is technically listed as a defensive end, but we have him listed as defensive tackle simply because we think that's likely. What he is. Yeah. That's likely what's going to happen there. So if you look at this list, I think that the good news for the Cowboys is, especially at defensive end, you feel like you've got two guys at the top who, I only marked one of them as a sure starter, but I think we all feel good about the potential of Gregory with a full off season and to see what that happens. You feel good about those two guys. And then you've got, 4 guys after that who, are probably NFL players, right? You've got 3 guys who have definitely taken lots of snaps in the NFL, whether it be as a starter or as a backup in Basham, Armstrong, and Watkins. And then Golson is a guy who you've drafted with the high floor. You think he's going to be able to come in and give you snaps right away. So looking at the defensive end room, even without including what you might be able to get out of Bradley and I potentially, and some of these other spots, Rondell Carter's a guy that they like. I think that you feel good that there is depth at the defensive end position. There's competition to see exactly what's going to happen behind there.
Really quickly, I think that's the one spot where I would like to see them add a bigger name. Like last year, right? We went into the season with Lawrence, Gregory, Alden Smith, Everson Griffin, Armstrong, right? I would like to see them grab somebody. I'm not saying as good as Everson Griffin, but somebody like that, because I think Basham and Armstrong are both really good, like 4th defensive ends. I'm not sure they should be 3rd guys, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they do, though. Because it feels like Basham might have been their vet signing. We'll see. I mean, I know that's not exactly someone to make anyone excited.
And if he's your 3rd defensive end, it's not awful. But I think there are guys out there that would be really good in that 3rd role. Like Melvin Ingram doesn't have a team. I could see how he would make a lot of sense. Justin Houston is still sitting out there in free agency, and he has, I think, 20 sacks over the last 2 years. If you got one of those 2 guys, and now they're the 3rd defensive end, and now Basham and Armstrong are competing for the 4th snaps, and Golston's maybe not having to play right away, then I think your defensive line looks a whole lot better. I worry a little bit about the depth. There's a lot of names, but there's not a lot of guys that give you much juice.
Yeah, and maybe that's what happens is that after some of the the other roster shaking out, we talked. I don't know if we actually talked about this or not, but the cuts that the Cowboys did the other day that kind of seemingly freed up a little bit of money, at least with Woods, a little bit over $2 million. Maybe there's more of that. Maybe someone like Cedric Wilson is a guy that now that Foco is on the team, he's a guy that you cut, you save a little bit more money. Maybe with all the savings, they can go out and afford to get a guy like Houston or Melvin Ingram. I don't think it's the worst idea. I think that they could also consider maybe getting another defensive tackle.
That's the other spot I was going to mention. Yep.
I mean, I think that you look at where we are with that, and Hill and Urban, Gallimore. I mean, look, the biggest unknown for us right now is what do Hill and Gallimore look like this. So now,
and how healthy is Tristan Hill? Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. And has he been able to develop while rehabbing from everything? So those are kind of the wild cards of the defensive tackle position, because the gap between where they could be and where they are, is pretty wide. We really just have zero idea of exactly where they are. Odigizua, I think, obviously is going to be a guy that's going to make the team. Bohanna, I think, has a good chance just because he has a kind of a different body type than everybody else. And we'll see what the Cowboys have. And I actually don't know how to say his name. Feo Liu, the BYU, isn't it? Yeah.
I wonder too if the Cowboys are still monitoring Gerald McCoy. I mean, I'm not reporting anything. I do think this is probably a signing that would not happen now. I'm guessing it happens at the end of training camp, if it does happen. Like, there's really no incentive to bringing in Gerald McCoy now. Like, let's see what Tristan Hill, Neville Gallimore, and Odigizua have. And then if we feel like we're still weak at the position, okay, Gerald McCoy would be 12, 13 months removed from his injury. Maybe now he comes in and helps us. And maybe he's somebody that comes in after week 1, right? Because then his salary isn't guaranteed for the rest of the season. I just wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys add another name there eventually.
Yeah, there's not going to be a race for the remaining vet free agents right now. I think it's we're not off to the races to try to get these guys. I think a lot of teams are going to probably get into OTAs at least and see what they have in place, and then they'll have a better feel for what they need or don't need. And I actually think that you'll see some more names added to the street at some point, just because that's always what happens with the draft, is that teams draft players. They think that they can get as good or maybe just slightly worse production for much cheaper players, and then they let the other player go. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for Cowboys to continue to add talent here, but I think that they may be in a holding point, at least until they can see some of these guys up close.
All right, let's talk about linebackers, because this is a fascinating group. Leighton Vander Esch, Micah Parsons, Jalen Smith. You have Keanu Neal listed as a safety. I think he's going to go back and forth. We saw Dan Quinn at his press conference say that he's a linebacker. How are these linebacker snaps going to shake out? Where do we expect these guys to at least start the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say. It's very hard to say. And I honestly, I would not be surprised to find out that it's hard for Quinn to say right now. I think they clearly have thrown a lot of things at the wall. They were clearly feeling that they needed to improve the linebacker play. And you know what? To their credit, and to the Cowboy, to the front office credit, and in the kind of in the face for a lot of things that get said about the Cowboys, they clearly are not afraid to correct these mistakes. You know what I'm saying? Like they at least identified that they needed more talent here, despite the investments that they've. And they recognize that, right? They adding Cox and Parsons certainly will add some speed to your linebacker core for sure. So I think even the guys that they liked down the stream that they were going to bring back, like Bernard and Gifford, who they like, neither of those guys are speed guys. So they felt like they needed
Bernard, especially not Bernard,
right? Especially not Bernard. That's the reason he fell. So.
It's probably going to come down to, I mean, you're just looking at the sheer numbers, right? Between Vander Esch, Neal, Parsons, Smith, Cox, that's 5 linebackers. Most years you keep 6 or 7, right? And it's really going to come down between Bernard and Gifford, who's better on special teams. And because I think Gifford has more athleticism, I wouldn't be surprised if that's who makes it and Bernard gets moved. I just think they're totally shifting the way that they're valuing linebackers now. And in fact, Landon, I wouldn't be shocked if they're, after the first initial cuts, if they're looking for more speed, if they're not looking to replace the bottom end of this roster with guys that are cut from other teams that are maybe have a little bit more athleticism. And I don't think that's the worst strategy either, right? You should be turning the bottom of your roster every year or so.
I agree. Yeah, I don't hate that strategy. And like I said, I'm just glad that they identified that they had a problem and they weren't afraid to admit that they made mistakes there and are moving on that. So that's a good sign.
All right, let's talk about cornerbacks. But before we do that, Landon, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar. It's hard to even explain it. I'm not lying when I wake up and I look forward to that coconut brownie chunk at lunchtime. Just absolutely fantastic. Real chocolate, amazing flavors, just a great combination of low calories, high protein, and low sugar with no crazy additives. Best of all, they taste absolutely incredible. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off your next box. Make sure you go to BuiltBar.com. All right, Landon, I want to talk about cornerbacks because it's way less depressing than the safety room. We've got Diggs penciled in as a starter. He's going to play a lot. Kelvin Joseph, we figure that he's probably going to open as one of their outside cornerbacks opposite of Diggs. We've got Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis for the 18th straight year fighting for snaps in the slot. Yep. And then it gets really, really interesting because I think both you and I agree that CJ Goodwin is a lock to make this roster because of special teams, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So there's 5 corners, right? Now we've got a competition between Maurice Kennedy, Reggie Robinson, who they drafted last year, Nashawn Wright, who is pick number 99, Israel Mukuamu, who you actually have listed as a safety. All of these guys potentially fighting for 1, maybe 2 spots. How do you anticipate this shaking out here?
All right. So one of, and even though I have it listed here, don't necessarily hold me to that, right? One of either Mukuamu, Lewis, or Reggie Robinson will end up at safety.
They have to, just for depth reasons, right?
Absolutely. And I would not be surprised. I'm keeping him here for now, but now that they've drafted all these cornerbacks, I would not at all be surprised if it's Jordan Lewis. You know, I think that they had a vision for him when they re-signed him. It was a little bit confusing when they did. Part of it was, not because I don't hate Jordan Lewis. I think he should be playing safety. I think that the idea is that they may have had a vision here. Look, the other thing too is that Joe Wright, I'm sorry, I'm getting his name, the defensive backs coach, and Dan Quinn, both of them have
Joe
history.
Wood, right?
Joe Wood, sorry, yeah, have history converting these guys, these kind of slot corner guys to safety. I mean, that's what DeMonte KZ was, right?
Yeah.
So I have to think that one of these guys has got to end up at safety. And then, the other 2 will end up back at cornerback, and it's going to be an incredible fight. I mean, there's just only so many spots. You have to keep Goodwin for special teams reasons.
And he's fine as your 5th or 6th corner. He's fine.
So yeah, I think that you have quite a battle royale going on and I think the thing that helps here is the extended practice squad rosters. There's the Cowboys are clearly going to hope to stash one of these guys, but I have to think that it's going to be an all-out war between Mukuamu, Wright, Robinson, potentially Lewis if he stays at corner. I mean, I think Lewis, if he stays at corner, they will have to really like the rookies a lot in order to cut Lewis, I imagine.
I would imagine. A couple of things I want to throw in there really quickly. Rashard Robinson, who is actually not listed on the depth chart, and the reason why is because he got suspended for the first 2 games. I would imagine that he's not going to make the team, and that's
no.
Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think he'll make the team after the suspension is over. I do think the Cowboys will keep him on that list, until as long as possible, because it's just another guy that knows the scheme. But when the Cowboys do release him, they can save about $1 million. I think that's a pretty easy decision. Maurice Kennedy, who I actually kind of like a little bit. I was excited when they signed him last year. I'm just not sure how he fits now that you brought back Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis, right?
I gotta say too, I mean, this is not my thing, but I guarantee you this is their thing. I bet you anything him opting out did not leave him in good standing with the Cowboys coaches. So I do wonder if he is only on this list for name reasons only, and he may not even be in their plans, to be honest.
And another thing, they can cut him before the season and save over $1 million. to me, that seems as good as he is as a number 4 corner. That seems like a pretty easy decision for a team that's up against the cap, correct?
Yeah, and especially since we got like 5 guys that we don't mind playing as our 4th corner at this point, right?
No,
Most of them
the value
rookies.
for him is playing in the slot. But again, if you have 2 guys that you feel really good that can do that, and actually 3 if you count KZ, there's probably just not spots for him. Now, a couple of things I wanted to mention about the safeties. So you have Keanu Neal as a safety. I don't know whether he's going to play there or not. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
DeMonte Casey. He tore his Achilles, I believe, after a couple games last year. Would it surprise you at all, Landon, if he opens the season up on the PUP and the Cowboys open up a roster spot that way?
No. I mean, I think if he hasn't quite had the trajectory they want, I mean, they certainly. I mean, even if he has and they can get away with it, they may do that, right? Like, I mean,
it might just make sense to do that. Yeah.
As a roster mechanism, they do that a lot. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the Cowboys have been known to get tricky like that and kind of follow the rules to the letter of the law to their advantage. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And not just because I'm sure there's so many injured players last year. That they could probably get away with that on a couple of different fronts. To be honest.
All right. Last question. Looking at this depth chart right now. Where's the biggest hole? Is it at defensive tackle or is it at safety?
I think it's hard to say right now. I think clearly defensive tackle and safety are your candidates, right? But I think that without knowing, this is all hypothetical. Like we haven't gotten specific answers on who is playing safety, and I mean we know a little bit more about who's playing defensive tackle. I think, but
I think we know the floor at safety, right? I mean, if Donovan Wilson is your strong safety, and let's say it's Darian Thompson as your free safety, I don't love that. I mean, I like Donovan Wilson. It's just when I look at this roster, Landon, they have one guy that can play free safety, and he's coming off a torn Achilles.
I can't see. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think Donovan Wilson can play free safety. I think Darian Thompson is not going to make the team.
I don't disagree. He should.
I think after last year's performance, and they just have numbers now. Like, so they don't necessarily need Darian Thompson because they've signed a couple of guys and they have more talent above even Javon Curse. Like we've forgotten that the Cowboys signed Javon Curse. I'd rather have Javon Curse than Thompson. So
J-Ron Curse.
I'm sorry, J-Ron Curse. Yeah,
I would take
Javon Curse too. Yeah, I'm sorry, J-Ron Curse. Yes, I will take Javon Curse if he wants to come back as 27-year-old Javon Curse. No, I just think that I think Wilson played a lot more free safety than we remember, and I think he could do that if they needed to. I think Kazee is obviously the natural choice to be the starter, the starter at free safety there. Again, I'm not ruling out Lewis. I'm not ruling out Makamu making an impression there. But I do think that Kazee or Wilson tend to be the likely choice at free safety there, unless they actually have an eye on somebody who's still on the market.
I will say, if we see that like KZ is at training camp and he's practicing and he looks like the old KZ, I will immediately feel 10 times better about this defense, because I think that's my biggest spot of worry is just they don't have anybody right now that can play that free safety spot. If he's healthy and playing, and now you've got Neal and Donovan Wilson playing the strong safety spot, okay, I'm really excited about this defense potentially getting back to average. But without KZ and his kind of status up in the air, it does make me feel a little nervous.
Yeah, I guess the thing that does make me feel a little bit better about it, they kicked the tires on guys like Hooker and decided not to go get those guys. They have opportunities still to go if they get a little bit further along, and they think KZ's not going to be ready and they're not exactly sure who's playing free safety or even third safety after the week one if Kazee out. So there is still opportunity to move. The problem is with both of these positions, defensive tackle and safety, you've got Hill and KZ respectively, who are kind of wild cards, and they're wild cards at the top of your depth chart. So you really just don't, because you just really don't know what the status is going to be of either one of these two players at the beginning of the season. And if they aren't ready to go, or they aren't ready to be immediate contributors, the Cowboys need to make a move on the free agent market or kind of figure something out there to at least band-aid that situation for the first few weeks of the season.
the last thing I want to say is DeMarcus Lawrence and Trevon Diggs better not get hurt, because if one of those two gets banged up for any point in time, this defense is going to be in trouble, because they just don't have players of that caliber ready to go to replace them. And it makes you a little bit nervous, but let's hope that the Cowboys defense can stay relatively healthy this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing I'll mention is that the hope that Randy Gregory with a full off season and
his first full off season ever.
I mean, just what we saw at the end of the year from him was outstanding.
Yep.
So if he can continue to grow the way that I know that he can, we may be talking about another superstar on that defensive line.
That is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audacity, wherever you get your podcasts. Continue to follow the show on YouTube. You can follow Landon at McCoolBCB, and I'm at Marcus _Mosher. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you